my interest in Hindu mythology and Indic faith traditions actually came late in life after I started Manushi. And since Manushi was universally, largely celebrated as the voice of protesting women, as the voice of women of India who were asserting their rights and fighting for their dignity, it was assumed that we were therefore following in the footsteps of Western feminists. It was also assumed that everything was wrong in India. I remember when in the early years of Manushi, whenever either I traveled abroad or I was interviewed even here by journalists, the narrative that they tried to impose on my life was that of total subjugation, oppression, and as though for the first time in history some of us were waking up to new dawn. And it was also assumed that we were inspired by the feminist movement in the West. And I was very often called the Kate Millett of India, the Gerda Lerner of India, and all the rest of it. Also, I got tired of being asked questions like, have you had an oppressive father? Did he let you study? How did he treat you in comparison to your brothers? It was assumed that if women in India escaped being killed in the mother's womb, if somehow escaped female infanticide or feticide, then they would end up being treated very shoddily by their parents. And if they managed to somehow grow up and got married, then they would be beaten up for dowry. And if they were lucky to have escaped death at the hands of abusive husbands, and if they were lucky to have grown up sons, then they would live under the shadow of their husband, and then later on their sons. They could never have any independence or autonomy. And I would even be asked questions like, how many satis have you had? Was your grandmother burnt on her husband's pyre? I mean, things like that. Now, when I looked around and I looked at my own life, nothing of the sort had happened. I had the most doting father who treated me better than any son anywhere in the world could be treated. At age 5, I had more freedom than any man could have had at age 55 anywhere in the world. So my parents, far from discriminating, gave me far more freedom, unconditional support and love than they gave to their sons. And I also looked around my own family neighborhood, and I saw a lot of strong women, including my own grandmothers. And so I began to perforce ask myself, where is it that this space of the kind that's available to me and my grandmother comes from? If it's all about oppression, if India's history is only about 5,000 years of unremitting oppression, how is it that so many extraordinary women have blossomed and flowered in this land of ours? And that's really what forced me to engage with our cultural traditions as well as Indic faith traditions. As you can see, the subject of my presentation today is of humans and divines, female exemplars and icons in Hindu mythology and faith traditions. And as I said, I got engaged in it because all of this feminist negative stereotyping revolved around seeing our past history as one of unremitting oppression of women, a land of Sitas and Savitris, and Sita was equivalent to a wife who was subject to Agni Parikshas and humiliations. But people saw all these iconic figures, mythological figures, quite differently. And that's the story that I'm going to present. Now, some of the characteristic features of Hindu faith traditions, I'm not going to say something very new or original, just going over familiar ground for you. Firstly, there's no sharp divide between humans and divines in the Hindu faith traditions. Divine is supposed to dwell in every being, animate and inanimate, human as well as non-human. And Hindu deities are not distant figures sitting up in the heaven, giving commandments, expecting unconditional obedience. They take avatar and descend on earth to appear as ordinary mortals in intimate human relationships. For example, Ram appears as the son of King Dashrath, where he must perform normal human duties. Krishna, as the son of Yashoda, also gets frequent spanking. He's not held in awe, he's not treated like some divine creature. He gets the treatment that any son does who's naughty. And as I said, they don't issue commandments and do not expect unconditional obedience in the way that gods or the god in Semitic traditions expect. They are fed, clothed, allowed to have rest, have regular timings for sleep, they get married, have children, they also create tantrums. They're not perfect at all. And I think that's one of the most liberating features of Hindu faith traditions. We don't expect our gods to be perfect. So no human being also therefore dare claim invincibility or perfection. And the divine can appear in inanimate as well as in inanimate objects. So we worship rivers, we worship animals, we worship mountains, we worship trees. And the humans and divines in this Leela are forever connected to each other. Even today you'll see Ram, Sita, Vivah being celebrated as though it's the, she's the daughter of that whole region. Orchha, even in Singapore I saw a grand celebration of Shiv Parvati Vivah. And another unique feature of our Indic faith traditions is that people of different faiths, Hindu, Muslim, Sikhs, Christians, Buddhists, they often worship at common sacred sites and have common revered saintly figures. This doesn't happen in many other cultures. One essential tenet of Hinduism is that Shakti, the feminine energy, is believed to represent the primeval creative principle underlying the cosmos. She is the energizing force of every being, of every act and everything, both the energy behind animate as well as inanimate object. And the energy of God is feminine. Without his Shakti, even the most powerful gods are powerless or even dead. These are things you all know. We also know that this Shakti manifests itself in different avatars, sometimes as Durga, sometimes as Parvati, Radha. She also appears in the form of mighty rivers, Ganga, Narmada, Yamuna. They are also worshipped as goddesses, as deities. So you have a whole range of feminine icons, feminine behavior patterns. There's no standard homogeneous form of feminine behavior expected. As for example in the West, they assume that there is a standard feminine behavior which is the approved social conduct. Any woman who falls out of line from that feminine code is ostracized. So it's assumed that women like me who've exercised a great deal of freedom should have faced trouble, should have been ostracized by society, should have been condemned. But it doesn't quite happen that way in India, which is not to say that we do not witness or we do not have simultaneously very brutal forms of oppression of women. This is not to deny that female feticide does take place. This is not to deny that daughters are discriminated in many homes. This is not to deny that many wives are treated brutally by their husbands, that there is a good deal of domestic violence. This is not to deny that many widows live very, very brutal, very, very despised lives. All that is true. However, what I'm saying, or what we experience in daily life, that the very opposite and many more things are also simultaneously true. The all-powerful feminine force assumes diverse forms, taking different avatars to fulfill diverse purposes at different times. For example, Lakshmi, the goddess of wealth, Saraswati personifies wisdom and learning and is the presiding deity of arts and literature. Durga is the vanquisher of evil. And while we worship Saraswati as the goddess of learning. There is no denying that many families do not pay attention to education of their daughters. So what I am presenting is not to overlook some of the serious challenges women of India face. But the point that I would like to emphasize is whether the choice is ours, whether we want to fight from a vantage position of strength, use the best aspects of our cultural traditions, of faith traditions to combat the negatives, or do we want to create an overall overwhelming narrative of oppression, of brutalization, in which then the answer is we can only escape this predicament only if we westernize ourselves, only if we follow the West. What they did is what we should be doing, and that's where our nirvana lies. My submission is that that model only produces caricatures of freedom. It doesn't really give you the strength to battle the oppressive realities that we are faced today. Now, there are two kinds of goddesses, consort and non-consort goddesses. The consort goddesses, like Radha, Sita, Parvati, benign, compassionate mothers. They are revered. People approach them with prayers for boons, for blessings, and they are unconditional in their nurturing. They are revered but not feared. It is the non-consort goddesses like Durga and Chandi who are the ones who are feared, and even men tremble in awe before them. You can afford to overlook Ram and Krishna. Nobody is afraid of Ram, Krishna in the way that they are of Durga Ma or Kali Ma. And this continuing tradition of goddesses and continuing tradition of fearing, not just revering, but also fearing the feminine in her powerful avatar as the avenging deity against wrongdoers, is what provides a very unique space to Indian women to exercise authority. And that's why you see in every village and in every city you will find little mini Durgas. People will not mess around with them. Any woman who displays extraordinary strength, valor or courage will be called Sakshat Durga, साक्षात चंडी का अवतार है, इससे पंगा मत लेना, ये चंडी रूप न धारण कर ले. मेरी माँ भी कहा करती थी मेरे रिश्तेदारों को, ये तभी तक मेरी बिटिया शांत है जब तक आप इससे खामखा पंगा नहीं लोगे. Don't step on her toes and don't force her into Durga avatar. And that's how everybody learned to treat me with a certain caution and allowed me the kind of freedom that I enjoyed. And as you well know, every village in India has a Gram Devi or Devata. Gram Devatas are usually connected with acts of extreme piety, but myths of Gram Devis tell us of ordinary women who rose in rage because they were sought to be ravished or to avenge other wrongdoers. Their righteous rage has the potential to destroy the universe and thus elevates them to the status of the divine. And as I said a minute ago, the continuing tradition of goddess worship, in the humblest of village, it's not something that we've had to be taught. In the West, they are battling to find space for women because the mythology itself or theology itself treats women as a junior partner. Our Eves were not created from Adam's rib. They are the energizing force of universe, and even men look to such women for protection. Another unique feature, characteristic feature of Hindu faith traditions is that human beings are allowed to be elevated to the status of the divine. Just as the divine takes avatar to come and live among human beings in the form of ordinary, a son, a brother, a friend, Sudama ke dost hai Krishna. Similarly, the reverse is also true. Any person who manifests signs of extraordinary valor, courage, commitment to a cause, bhakti, devotion, or tapasya, rises to the level of the divine and sometimes even superior. I'm sure you're all familiar with stories of how such and such tapasvi, Rishi Muni was doing tapasya और इंद्र का सिंहासन हिलने लगा और वो नीचे आया, बताओ प्रभु क्या चाहते हो, I'm here to do your bidding. So this relationship where humans can acquire greater powers than divines is another unique feature. And the Bhakti movement in particular has produced numerous icons of feminine autonomy. It's very interesting that the Bhakti movement, which started in the south in Tamil in 6th century and spread in waves in different regions and states of India up to 17th century, produced outstanding women saints in almost every region. And each one of these women lived very extraordinary lives. Their songs are today, even today, an integral part of popular culture in their respective regions. So it's not like in the West where they say that women writers, their writings, they had to fight for a room of their own, for a space of their own. They had to fight to get space in academic curriculum. And this was the big battle that feminists had to fight over a century and a half. But here, if you look at the lives of these women and the way they came to be within their own lifetime, became iconic figures, it tells a lot about the unique space that Indian society provides to women, even while a large number of women might live very restricted and oppressed lives. Most of the women bhakts refused marriage. Most didn't marry at all. Others walked out of oppressive marriages. Some, like Mirabai and Mahadevi Akka, were born in royal families but chose the life of mendicants and became one with ordinary people. They all defied crippling restrictions and notions of respectable feminine behavior. Aviyar transformed herself into an old woman at the prime of her youth because she didn't want male attention. So she said even in the prime of her youth, she had that kind of power that she could appeal to her chosen deity to say, make me an old woman so that I don't have to deal with male attention. And another one, Karai Kallamayar, begs Lord Shiva to transform her into a demoness so that she could stand by him in prayer like the girls who worship at Shiva's dancing feet. Andal at age 18 simply merges into the idol of her beloved Venkatesh, and so does Mahadevi Akka. Lal Der, the Kashmir's celebrated saint poet, was revered alike by Hindus and Muslims, walked naked like also Mahadevi Akka, because she said these clothes are a hindrance and a trapping, a social trapping. They come in the way of perfect union with her chosen deity Shiva. And nakedness, as you know, signifies being open to the experience of God. It is also the ultimate defiance of society, the casting away of every facade of cultivated outward appearances and everything that separates one from others. By exposing the difference between male and female, by becoming indifferent to that difference, the woman is liberated from it. And what's interesting is, and what's important to note is, none of these women were ostracized by society. Meera, yes, for example, she faced a lot of trouble in the royal family. Her relatives tried to poison her, but when she walked out, she was already an accepted and revered saintly figure of her times. It's not like what happened to learned women in Europe. They were burnt on the stakes as witches. But these women have temples built to them and they are worshipped even today. Another important characteristic of Hindu faith traditions is that our deities are willing to be judged by human beings by the same standards that human beings would use for judging each other. For example, Ram is celebrated as Maryada Purushottam, and yet his treatment of Sita in demanding Agni Pariksha has never been forgiven to him through these centuries. Krishna, when he plays pranks, gets beaten like any naughty child would be beaten. If he tells lies, if he misguides, if he doesn't live up to the perfect dharmic code, he's condemned. It's not as if our gods can get away with wrongdoings. They are not only condemned, but what's important is that devotees and non-devotees alike have the right to not only judge them by how well they perform their roles as human incarnations, but also demand improved behavior. And that's how we have hundreds of Ram Kathas in which Ram is made to play a more decent husband, a more acceptable, a more worthy husband of Sita. In the Valmiki Ramayana, you see Ram's treatment of Sita in demanding Agni Pariksha and then banishing her even after she passes the Agni Pariksha, hits you hard as an unacceptable injustice. But in Tulsi Ramayana, Tulsi just passes over, because I think Tulsi could stand the idea of his Ram having acted in that manner. And there are hundreds of Ramayans written in which either Ram is condemned very soundly and made to improve, or he's shown having acted justly to begin with. For example, the Agni Pariksha was supposed to have been given to a Chaya Sita, not real Sita. And I distinctly remember when Ramanand Sagar's television serial was being telecast, in the midst of it, as the serial approached, as it neared Agni Pariksha sequence, he was flooded with letters from viewers saying, "You dare not show 20th century Ram subjecting Sita to another Agni Pariksha. We are not willing to accept it." So he did appear on television screen and said, "Don't worry, this is only Chaya Sita." And then he cites many other रामायण, कंबन रामायण हमने यहाँ से लिया, हमने वहाँ इस रामायण से लिया, ये सब सत्य हैं, और सीता की अग्नि परीक्षा सही में हुई नहीं थी, that was only a play, that was only Leela, and so on. So you can see the pressure that devotees can exercise on their chosen deities to say, you better behave yourself, we will not accept this, और वो ज़माना गया जब तुम ये कर सकते थे, today this is not acceptable. And a recent example of Ram reform campaign I would like to share with you is Lakshmi Mukti campaign by Shetkari Sangatna. So it's not only in literary texts that you see an improved version of Ram, you see it also, the Sita symbol, the injustice done to Sita hang heavy on the conscience, the collective conscience of Indian people, so that even today you can use that to evoke the most powerful sentiments among men to say, no, this can't be repeated. And I'll give you an example. In 1989, Sharad Joshi, the leader of Shetkari Sangatna, launched this Lakshmi Mukti campaign. This is one of the most powerful farmers' movements of those times, and I worked very closely with Shetkari Sangatna during those years. And in fact, my request to Shetkari Sangatna leadership was, let's not wait for laws. Let's not wait for government to enact this or that laws to strengthen women's rights. We must build a new environment where society begins to honor them voluntarily. And one outcome of that collaboration was the Lakshmi Mukti Karyakram. And the sum total of this Karyakram, if I were to sum it up, was the message that Joshi gave to his farm followers, peasant followers, was that till such time as you don't lift the curse of Sita Mata from your life. Till such time as you keep your own Graha Lakshmis poor and dependent and oppressed, you will not be able to win the battle of your own economic rights. The Shetkari Sangatna movement basically was aimed at removing needless government controls on agriculture which depressed farm prices. Their slogan was Bhik Nako Have Ghamache Dam. Bhik Nako Have Ghamache Dam. हमें भीख नहीं चाहिए, हमें अपनी मेहनत का दाम चाहिए, सही दाम जो सरकार उनको लेने नहीं देती थी. तो शेतकरी संगठन ने एक नई किस्म की इकोनॉमिक्स अपने फार्मर फॉलोअर्स को सिखाने की कोशिश की कि आप अपनी घमाचे दाम मांगते हो, मेहनत और पसीने के दाम मांगते हो, then learn to also count all the tasks that your Graha Lakshmi does. From morning till evening, she gets up at 5 a.m., takes care of the animals, takes care of children, cleans the house, cooks, feeds everyone, then goes to the farm, comes back carrying fodder and fuel. She'll spend 2 hours carrying headloads of fuel and fodder, comes back to cook, takes care of animals. If somebody is sick, she will stay up all night. And for that 15-16 hour work day, what do you give her? Maybe 2 saris a year, if you can afford it. Maybe not even that. And any time you can tell your wife, nikal ja mere ghar se, get out of my house, if you don't like her, if there is some dispute. And his message was that just as Prabhu Ram, and that this injustice being done to women is nothing new, that Maryada Purushottam Ram himself set a very bad example, because Sita, who had accompanied him through his vanvas, saying, wherever goes Ram, there goes Sita. She didn't choose to stay in the palace. She could have, because she was not exiled. But when he became king, the moment he comes back, at the mere aspersion of a dhobi or whatever, he abandoned her. But even before that, he demanded Agni Pariksha. Despite that Agni Pariksha, he did not allow her the full rights of a queen, and at the mere hint of suspicion of his subjects, even though he knew himself that his Sita was as pure as Mother Earth, and even fire could not touch her, and yet he abandoned her. And he built this beautifully, saying, even if he couldn't keep her as his queen, could he not have at least built a little jhopla for her in Ayodhya and say, okay, you stay here? Could he not have given her 2 rooms in the palace? She was pregnant. Could he not have made some arrangements? No, he didn't do that. Instead, he abandoned her to her own fate and destiny. And then Sharad Joshi would narrate the story of this village, Yotmal district mein, Raveri village, where apparently Sita, as a Bikharin, after having been abandoned by Ram, went around begging for some grain. But these villagers didn't give her that, and she then cursed them that you will never be able to grow grain. Though Sita is not known for cursing, but in that area people believe it's Sita Ma's curse that resulted in their inability for centuries. They couldn't grow any wheat, they couldn't grow any grain, even though in the neighboring districts there was plenty of grain. They believed this was the curse, this was due to the curse of Sita Ma. And that's why Shetkari Sangatna not only rebuilt that old abandoned temple, but gave the message to its followers that you better not behave like Prabhu Ram. He came to grief because he abandoned his wife, who was purity incarnate, and he doubted. And unless you give your wives their due, you will never be able to prosper. And believe you me, all the incentive given was that any village in which 100 or more families voluntarily transferred a portion of their land in the name of the woman of the household would be given this certificate of honor. And within no time, hundreds of villagers lined up to give their due share, to offer this. It was presented as repayment of a long overdue debt to the Griha Lakshmi. And finally, I really think the idea of one true God, I think, is an idea whose time is over long ago. It's only when each one of us are free to relate to the divine in whatever way we like, in whatever form we like, and when the divine feels accountable to us and responds to our needs, and we don't have to be slaves to the divine power that be, that we become worthy of a democracy. Thank you.